Welcome, guys, to this week's episode of Heavy More Tones with me, your podcast host, Tony Evans. It's slightly changed from the norm this week. It's going to be just me chatting re-Halloween stuff and ghosty stuff, as you can tell by the title. Firstly, I just want to apologise that right at the end of last week's episode, I said Andy Sneap's voicing is really amazing on the outro. I'm going to say phrasing. Because it's an acoustic piece of music, and I was meant to say phrasing, but vocals is on the head, and I boo-booed, and it was too hard for me to go back and take this little section out. So those that listened last week are going, what do you mean he's not singing on the outro? No, it's just the phrasing. Anyway, if you're listening to this now, hopefully you'll be listening to it around Halloween, either just before or just after. I can't remember when this gets sent out, but anyway, this is my Halloween episode. So this is my haunted life. These are true stories from my past. Now, you may want to believe me, you may want not to believe me. You may want to roll your eyes and be skeptical, or you might want to say, yeah, I believed. I'm with you, Tone. I don't mind. If you think I'm cuckoo, that's fine. If you don't, it doesn't matter. This is just me letting you know my story. And we'll begin in a second. Let me just get my cup of coffee over from the table. Oh, not coffee, tea, see. I just went out for coffee this morning. So where to begin? Right. So I don't know if you all know this, and some of you will know. I used to chat to a ghost podcast called with Kevin Eustace, right? We need to talk about ghosts. I used to interact with him quite a bit, and because I have lived with this, I don't know whether it's an ability or whether it's a curse or whether it's something, I don't know what you'd call it. I've lived with it now in my life where it seemed hauntings and the spirit world seemed to follow me quite a bit. Now, this is not to say that I'm suddenly living with a house full of ghosts. No, it's not the case. But just things have happened in my life that, along the way, that have really been a bit different. My mother, God rest her soul, my mother had the sight. My mother was from as I mentioned before in the previous podcast, from a German family way back 200 or 300 years ago from Germany. Probably a bit longer than that. And she had this unnerving sense, like she knew things before they happened. She would often have moments where it would scare me as a child, to be honest with you. When this is a very personal thing, I'm going to tell you this now. When my mother passed away 27 years ago now, my mother was in hospital. She was very sick, and she said to my dad, can you go and get me a cup of tea from the cafe outside the hospital, because I don't like the hospital tea. And he went away to go and dutifully do as he's asked, and he come back and Mum had passed away. Now I think, and I really do know this, that my mum knew that it was her time, and she wanted to be alone. She didn't want to put Dad through that moment. I can't imagine what it would have been like. I don't want to imagine what it would have been like, but my mum knew. The people say that people know at the end, don't they? But my mother always knew. And it was just one of those things. So where do I begin? Let's begin at the beginning, Tony. So my very first experience that I have of the spirit world begins quite innocently. I was probably five, maybe 5.5. No, I was 5. It was my 5th birthday because I got a... do you remember the Buckaroo game? Where you had the horse and you take the plastic toys off before it bucked? Well, there was a shark version, a Jaws version, where you open his jaws and you had to pull out the bits of like anchors and floaties and bits like that, and you had to try not to make his mouth shut on to lose the game. I remember that vaguely because that was one of those gifts that I'll never forget. Anyway, I had to share my birthday cake with my younger brother because Robert was always a bit a little bit needy. And my mum made this awful cake. My dad, who was a pastry chef, didn't make it. My mum made it because she said she'd do it. And it was, God rest her soul, my mother could not cook. She could burn water, my mother. She could probably sizzle. She could probably, she'd make toast that was unedible. With my mum, you never knew what you're getting with her. Dinner would come, and it was always a bit of a bingo card of what would you find in your meal. Elastic bands, paper clip, an old cold baked bean on the bottom of a teacup. Sounds horrible, doesn't it? But it was just my mother. She just wasn't at all domestic. She was a ballet dancer, and she was a dancer and a gifted dancer, and she didn't really want to be a housewife, but that was the way it was back then. Anyway, it was my 5th birthday, and I was out playing in the garden, and I came into the house, and I went into the lounge room, and sitting in the lounge room next to the fire was the oldest person I'd ever seen in my life. Absolutely like a hag, like a really old person with a long pointed nose and a little beanie hat on, and was hunched over. And I screamed and ran out. I had no idea. And she didn't turn to look at me, just kept looking straight ahead. And when I told my mum, she said there was no one in there. There was no one in the lounge room. We went back in, and there was no one there. I later found a picture of my great-grandmother, and it was my great-grandmother. And from then on, things would happen. Like, not regularly, but they would happen. I still see her in my head. I can still see exactly what she looked like. It's crazy. All those years ago, 45 years ago, I can tell you exactly what she was wearing, how she was sitting, motionless, completely motionless and devoid of any motion, of any movement. Didn't turn her head, didn't look at me, just sat straight ahead. I've always imagined what Mum said to me, and I've asked my dad in the past, and he has no memory of it, because my dad just, he's got dementia now anyway, but before then he didn't really have much memory of things because he would have been at work that day anyway. And then as I got older, I shared a house with 4 brothers, as I've told you before, all music lovers, all in different types of different aspects of life and different times of their lives, quite a big space apart. And I shared a bedroom with my older brother that used to be my mum and dad's bedroom, and they moved into there, into my brother's room, because the one mum and dad's room was bigger. Okay, no, so probably the other way around. They moved into the room that they're in now. Yes, that's right. It used to be my brothers and my room, and they moved in there. And on the wall, it was just imagine it's the 60s, right? 70s house, and there's like shiny, bright, patterned silver kind of wallpaper. And on the wall, at the front on one of the walls was a poster of Bruce Lee, slightly ripped, holding the nunchucks from Enter the Dragon. And opposite that picture was my bed. There was 2 beds. My dad bought a couple of bunk beds and cut them in half because he was, thought they'd save some money. And there were those sort of metal beds with the springy springs, the ones that almost feel like prison cell beds. And I was lying there. Now, I would have been probably 8 or 9, I think. It was a beautiful sunny day. The light was streaming through the window. The light when I've got to you picture it. The light's coming through the window, and the dust and the particles are caught in the beams of light through the net curtains. And I'm lying on the bed having a bit of a nap. It's a Saturday morning. I'd just been up early watching kids' TV programs and gone back to bed, waiting for Mum to make. We never had lunch, but Mum would make like sandwiches if on a weekend. Really, it was our only sort of luxury, really. And I was lying in bed having a nap, and I woke up, and right opposite my bed again was this really tall, menacing clown. Now, I thought I was dreaming this, but I remember it now as if I was awake. I don't know if for 42 years later I would remember it a dream, but this was so vivid. He was at the end of my bed, and he was so tall that he was curled over and he's sort of hunched into under the ceiling, and he's sort of leaning over the bed, and it wasn't like a It kind of clown. It was just like an ordinary, like a Ronald McDonald's kind of clown. He didn't have any like sharp teeth or claws. He just was there, tall and grinning and swaying. I remember leaning over me like a Jack-in-the-Box clown, and I remember screaming. And in a second, he was gone. And Mum comes rushing in, and she said, "You must have had a nightmare." And I was wide awake, absolutely wide awake. Now, it could have been. It's one of those things in my life that I think may have been a dream, but I remember it so vividly. The house I grew up in. So, Mum and Dad moved around a few houses when I was young because it was a bit of a comedy of errors, really. The first house we grew up in Burnt Oakham, Lundell Crescent, the house blew up. Now, you might think, what do you mean blew up? But it actually did. My brother, my silly brother, there was a gas leak in the gas from the meter underneath the stairs, and my brother went looking for it with a match because there was no light under there, with a candle. Yeah. I mean, how Ronald survived it is beyond me. He got flown across the landing. Mum was blown out of the kitchen window. She broke a few bones, but obviously didn't die. And I was left in my cot upstairs. At that time, Robert hadn't been born yet, and I was in my cot upstairs. And my brother Michael rescued me. Now, he tells me that my cot fell through the floor. I don't believe that. I think he just went and saved my life. So I, for all of his silliness and his. I have issues with him in all sorts of ways. He still means a lot to me because he did save my life. And then we were put into several sort of different kinds of what they call in the UK in the 70s halfway houses, because I grew up in a council house. My mum and dad didn't own the house. We were Govo houses, they call it in Australia, and I don't know what they call it in America, but in England they call council houses. And so while they were waiting to put us into a house, they put us into this house after a couple of really bad moves. They moved us to this house in Hendon and Park Road, 96 Park Road. Sorry to shout that out, but that's where it was. And it was a corner house, quite it was so it was built in the 1920s, an old house, pre-war, and it'd been lived in by one old woman and her sister, so a couple of sisters, and they'd lived in there all their lives. They died in the house. Unfortunately, one of them died in my bedroom, which is probably why I had issues. But the weirdest thing that we found when we moved in, I remember I was only, I think I was probably, I think I was 18 months, 19 months when I moved in. But my brother tells me that he found up in the loft a bunk bed with magazines on it and a skull, he reckons. I mean, I think he was just doing that to wind us up. But the bunk bed was up there. I remember seeing that, and I remember seeing the magazine. So we think that there might have been squatters in previous to that. You just never know, right? Anyway, that's a side note. What I'm trying to say is it was a really menacing house. A really, really menacing house. And it had a real sort of, I don't know, we lived there for my parents lived there for 25 years, I think. In all that time, luck just seemed to seep away from the place. It was one of those kind of houses. Yeah, it sort of just, we arrived at the house. Dad was doing well in his career. My brothers were doing okay in school. Mum was pregnant with my younger brother. We thought this was a place that would be our home. This is what my mum and dad said to me later in life. They thought this would be the place to be, and we would finish here. It was a nice suburb. Hendon is a nice posh part of North London. Well, we didn't know sort of a raggy arse end of it, but it was still posher than where I grew up in Burnt Oak. And it all changed within a few months. Dad lost his business, stopped, couldn't get work. Mum got really sick. My brothers were sent to Borstal. Things just changed. It was really a negative house. And to be fair, I always felt that. My dad tells me a story that there was, I'm sidetracking. I'm not running this down. This is just off the top of my head. So if I go back and forth, I apologise. But this is my haunted life, right? So I remember vividly, my bedroom was floorboarded. I didn't have carpets. And it was a really small bedroom, pardon me, that I shared with my brother till I was 16, till he moved out. And until I actually moved out of home when I was 16 as well, but I came back again. But that is a different story. So my brother had this, he was obsessed, and he still is, with air guns, like cap guns and air pistols. And he had this little, what we call a gat gun, which is like you basically push the end the end of the gun into the back of the gun, which locates a spring in, and then you put the pellet in and you press the trigger and it fires it out, right? But you need this little cap at the back that holds when you put the pellet in, that holds the spring in. And I took that out, and I was sort of playing around with it, and I put it on the bedside table. I turned around, and I turned back, and it was gone. And it was nowhere. And I had floorboards. I'll tell you something, I pulled that bedroom apart because my brother was going to give me a caning for it. I couldn't find it anywhere. It was not in the grooves of the floorboard. It wasn't on the bed. It wasn't under the mattress. And I didn't have a boy look. I had a real thorough look. And, I still remember that to this day, Michael gave me a whoop. He gave me a good old smack for it because, I was probably about 11. And Michael was at that time, 18? 19? He really just, oh man, I got a absolute smacking for it. I don't blame him. Well, I don't condone violence, but I don't blame him being annoyed. And all sorts of things were missing. Money would go missing. Mum's wedding ring disappeared once for a while. Jewellery. We'd accuse each other for stealing stuff of ours when it wasn't them. And when my father tells me this story, and I believe him because my father's on the same kind of spectrum, sort of, as me. He was sleeping in the lounge room. Mum had moved. They'd moved out to the new home because Mum had got very, very sick and couldn't climb stairs. So they went to a special home up the road, which was one level, where my father sadly was until he went into a home. Easy for her to access, very easy to clean, easy to keep warm, cheaper to run, and so on, closer to the amenities. And Mum was in hospital, as she was, in and out, and Dad was sitting there in his chair, fell asleep watching TV. Everything's packed up, just the TV in his chair and the fire. And he woke up, and in the middle of the room was all this stuff. Little plastic soldiers, the end of that cap gun, the gat gun, money, jewellery. It was just all returned. Now, you can believe me, you cannot believe me. You can say my dad's a liar, and that's perfectly fine. This is all about my belief, but if you believe it, it's up to you. It's my truth, right? I hate that term, but it is my truth. I believe my father when he said it happened, because he showed me some of the stuff that he got back, and it's stuff that I remember losing. Little green soldier, little green plastic soldier I got in a stocking when I was at Christmas. Action Man clothes, all that sort of stuff. The only thing I can think of is Dad was storing it, and he just felt guilty and gave it back. Like, why would he do that? It makes no sense. So the house itself had a spirit to it, an uneasiness to it. I never felt very happy alone. My father took all the locks off the doors because he, as a child, my father was treated quite poorly by my grandfather and locked in cupboards and stuff. So my father never liked having locks on the door, so nothing had locks on it. So I put my own lock on when I was like 12 or 13. My brother put his own lock on when he had started dating girls so we could have some privacy. But apart from that, none of them had locks. Toilets, bathrooms, nothing. And it never felt easy. I never felt easy, particularly on the staircase. Going up the stairs with my back to the... We used to have a larder. So in England, they had a cold storeroom called a larder, which is usually a room that's the coldest part of the house, and where you kept all your milk before you had fridges and so on. And the larder always felt like there was something in it. I always dreamt there was something coming out of that cupboard and walking up the stairs, faceless being that would come up and stand outside my door. And it was a regular dream. I had it probably the age of 13 till, well, even younger, until I was, before I left home. It was a regular dream I had. And I'd wake up in cold sweats with it. And when I'd go downstairs, the blue door was open to the larder, and it used to freak the shit out of me. To the point where I would put a chair in front of it when I went to bed. If I was on my own in the house, which was very rarely. I never stayed on my own in my house alone. I never liked it. Dad didn't like it. Mum was all right, but she sort of didn't like it either. It was just a place that, you know, it didn't want us there. That's what it felt like. I remember other times, apparitions that I picked up in that house. One of the ones most vividly was I was coming out of my bedroom, and above my bedroom door was the manhole cover to the loft. Now, my brother liked to spend a lot of time in the loft. That was his thing. I don't know why he loved it up there. He just loved it up there. He'd made a sort of a den up there. He'd put floorboards down. He'd put electric lights in. He quite liked it up there. And often he'd leave the blue trapdoor aside, right? And to climb up there, you need a ladder. But if you were like me, nimble, you just use the banister. Now, you'd get a ladder, but then you'd use the banister. I came out of the bedroom. It was mid-afternoon, maybe getting into dusk, and I looked up, and there were these feet in blue jeans and in what we call bother boots when I was a kid, like DMs, and they were turn-ups. My brother used to wear turn-ups, and they were hanging over the edge of the hole in the roof. And I was like, Mike, what are you doing? I thought you'd gone to work. And the legs sort of disappeared into the darkness, and I heard a laughter, didn't recognise it, and I was like, okay, Mike, stop being a dickhead, and off I went. And I went off to Brent Cross, whatever I was doing, catching up with mates, going to a gig, whatever. On the way, when I came back, I saw Mike, and I said, what the bloody hell were you doing in the loft this afternoon? He said, I wasn't. I was at work. I've been at work all day. I haven't been home until late night, which I didn't believe him, right? And he swears on his life that he wasn't at home, and he wasn't wearing those clothes, and he never owned. When I think about it, he didn't have bright red Doc Martens. They were not his thing. He wore black Doc Martens, and I was like, oh, okay. And he gave me a shiver, but I thought, and I said to him, I think there's someone in the loft, and we went up and looked, and there was no one there. No one. There was times when I would feel not alone in my bedroom, when I'd feel the presence of someone sitting on the end of the bed. So, you know, these things followed me a lot. When Grandad died, I was still living at Park Road then. I'm very close to my grandfather. And I had these real sort of heavy, dark thoughts, really bad, dark thoughts. And I went to a medium, would you believe? Because I couldn't get a large. Just like joking there. I went to a medium. My girlfriend at the time had said, come on, let's go to this medium, might help you. And I was like, oh, no, I don't believe all that crap. No, I'm not going to go. But I went. And the medium, without knowing me, without knowing my family, this was the other side of London as well. It wasn't like down the road. They didn't know my family. The medium knew my grandfather's name, my grandmother's name, who had died back in 1958. I think, again, it's on a side note. That comes, my mother had it from my grandmother, because my mother was pregnant with me. Mother was pregnant with my older brother, my first brother, Andrew, and in 1959. And it was the story goes that my mother says that before then, sorry, I apologise. I'm going back. Oh, see, this is the memories in my head. My mother and father were going to get married on March the 1st. Okay. And when my grandmother, she had a brain tumour from a fall that she had when she was a young woman. And at that time, she would have been 57, 58. And Agnes, her name was. And she said to my mother, get married on Boxing Day, because I won't be here on March the 1st. And my mother said, look, don't be silly. This is ridiculous. You don't be silly. But because my mother did everything her mother said, that's what they did. They got married on Boxing Day, 1958. And March the 1st, 1959, the day that my sister was born, my grandmother died. And this is something that I think like I said, my mother knew, and so did my grandmother. This is a really powerful... This is where I think it comes from, and it was handed to me. Anyway, so I backtracked to the house. So I never felt alone. I never felt comfortable. It was horrible in the dark. We never had any luck. Any luck that we got sucked out of that house. Our fortunes didn't change as a family, really, until we all separated out from that house, to be fair. Really. And I don't know whether it was the place or it was just our luck in our family. Who knows? Anyway, that's enough for the jibber jab on the first part. I've talked for 26 minutes, would you believe? And you go, Tony, that's understandable. You could talk for hours. I know I can. We're going to come to the second half. I'll talk then more about more modern, my more modern experiences with the supernatural. I hope it hasn't given you the willies. It's just I find it really fascinating and interesting. The second half might be a bit scarier, but anyway, chat to you in the second half. Bye for now.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New subscribers only. Renew for 12 months to lock in savings. Taxes and fees extra. Additional restrictions apply. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Welcome back to my spooky, haunted life. I'm going to move on to my teenage years. Now, I worked when I first left school. I left school at 16, which I regretted, and I went back and did further education. But I left school when I was 16. Not because I hated it. I just wanted to get into the big wide world. I was sick of being told what to do. And I went to work for a pittance, mind you, as an usher in my local cinema, Hendon Odeon. It was the Canon Cinema. It used to be the Odeon, the ABC, and then it became the Canon, owned by the Canon Group, that made some absolutely shocking movies. He-Man and the Masters of the Universe is one of them. We won't talk about that. And it was an old theatre that in the 30s would be one of those cinemas that had a restaurant attached, where you'd go for the whole day, you'd have meal, you'd see a theatre show, and then you'd stay, and a screen would come down, an organ would come up from the stage, and you watch a movie, right, with entertainments in between, musical. You had a big stage behind it, a big black stage, like a big backstage. It was really quite scary, and it was a really quite imposing building. And the first real reason that the time I knew that there was something going on, a lot of the old folks I worked with there wouldn't go and lock up Cinema One's exit 1 and 2. So Cinema 1 held 565 seats. It had a big stage and a big screen and two great big circular staircases that went down in the sort of brick back end of the building that took you down to the exits. They were push bar exits, so to lock them you had to put a chain around them, otherwise you could get in quite easily. So, Mr. Mugging's job here, Mr. Tony, Mr. 16-year-old first job. Go on, Tone, off you go. You go lock up number one's exits. So I go off, all full of piss and vinegar, as my dad would say. And I'm locking up. Now, this wasn't the first shift. I've done this a few times. But every time I'd go down there, on the left-hand side, I'd smell cigar smoke. Really strong cigar smoke. Now, back then, you could smoke in the cinema. There were smoking sections. So people didn't need to go in the exit to smoke. It was no need to. But you could always smell strong cigar smoke. And this one night, I remember the movie because it was Tango and Cash, I believe, was the movie that was on in that cinema. I think at the time, I think it was Tango and Cash. Yes. And I was going down there and I was locking up the chains. And I turn around and I see this. I didn't see all of him, but I saw a part of a guy sort of at the top of the stairs before it went round to the left in a boiler suit and a cap. And he sort of looked at me around the corner and then went round the corner. And I remember shouting, "Hey, mate, we're closing up here. You shouldn't be in the exits. You need to go out through the front." And being 16 and super fit, I pelted up the stairs. Absolutely pelted upstairs. And it's about 3 turns of about 20 steps per flight of stairs. And he was not there. He was not there. I run into the cinema. All I could see was my mate cleaning. Down at the front, nothing. I run into the foyer, asked the manager. His name was Mr. Dooley, I remember. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Anyway, the next morning, I bump into Ron, the old projectionist. Good old Ron. Strange old Ron. Funny old character. That's another story. He'd been working there since the late 60s. And I said to him, "Ron, did you lock up? You locked up the last person out of the building last night?" And he's, "Yeah." So did you see a guy in a boiler suit with a cloth cap, middle-aged man? And he said, "No, but I know who you're talking about." And I was like, "What do you mean you know who I'm talking about?" He said, "Well, this old fella, he hung himself off the pipes in the fire escape, the set of stairs you're on. If you look up there to the ceiling, there's several sturdy pipes, and he hung himself from there back in the late 60s." And I was like, I'd like, it freaked me out. I was like, "Were you taking the piss? Come on, what's going on?" And he goes, "You're lucky. Not many of us have seen him. I've seen him once or twice, and it was a really weird time because it seemed to come and follow me a bit. Of time I was on, there were times when I'd go into the side room to get posters to put out the front, and where the old chandelier was stored. And the lights would go on and off when I'm in there, like on and off, flicker on and off, or they would literally turn off. I'd go back, turn them on, they turn them off. It was a really horrible dark room as well, and I hated it in there. Never felt comfortable. I used to run up and down the exits in 1 and 2 now to do the chains. Really just didn't want to. I'd close my eyes if I could, I remember watching the chains. In fact, my mate Colin and I watched the chains on the front door sway after I'd locked them, like as if someone was checking them, and they were dead still when we walked away. I had my manager told me that he physically saw someone walk through the wall into his office. He was a bit of a drunkard, so maybe he was, I don't know, that was part of the thing. But the one that really stuck in my mind is that Colin and I, we'd reeled on because he was a projectionist, and I was training to be a projectionist as well because I wanted to get more money. And we reeled on this movie, and I think it's Death Becomes Her, but I also think it was Hand That Rocks the Cradle. And we put it on, and we thought, well, let's watch this movie before everyone else does. Let's watch it. And we wheeled it on. We're there watching it, and as I'm speaking to you as a truth, as my witness, the exit door in door 1 opened at the bottom near the screen and closed. And a few seconds later, exit door 2 opened and closed. We both looked at each other, Colin and I. Then we looked up for some reason, I looked up at the projection box, and there, looking through the window of the projection box, was a man in a cap. I could barely see his face. He didn't have much features, but he was wearing a cloth cap. And I'm not lying as I speak here. Colin saw it as well, and we ran out. We ran out of the cinema, and we came back the next day. We were in a lot of trouble because we left the projector on, which could run. Those things are really expensive if the bulbs go hundreds of pounds worth of bulb, and we let it just run through and flicker. And we got Colin got a warning, and I got a warning. We tried to explain that had happened, but they didn't believe us. And what we're going to believe? They're going to say that, yeah, ghosties and googlies kept you from doing your job properly. After that, Colin wouldn't be up in the projection room on his own. I wouldn't stay back and clean like I used to for extra money. I really hated going into the poster room or the room. One of my jobs was I used to get paid extra danger money to go onto the hoarding up a ladder and change the names of the movies coming, moving from one movie. I remember moving, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade down to Cinema 2, putting up the new one at the top and so on, like Dirty Rotten Scoundrels or whatever it was. And I used to get paid extra money for that because it was quite dangerous in the wind. And to go into a little room to get the numbers and the letters, and again, that didn't feel good either. It had a very bad vibe. At least to say that it wasn't a fun time working there. I was grateful when I finally got away from it, went back to college. But it just seemed to follow me. It seemed to escalate when I was there. The guy said nothing happened when they were there. So obviously it just clung on to me. But then I moved to Australia in 97. I meet my lovely wife. I have my first child. And my wife being Australian, so I wanted to come home and best move I ever made. And I moved to Australia in 87. And soon after that, my mother, within 2 weeks of coming, my mother died. Now, she had been diagnosed with an incurable cancer that I hadn't been told about. And my dad decided to keep it from me so that we wouldn't change our minds and we would go and do the right thing for us. Because Mum held Dad back slightly because, God rest her, Mum would never travel anywhere and didn't want to be away from Dad. And so when Dad got opportunities to work for British Aerospace, he worked for a little while for Rolls-Royce. That's where they met. Working for Rolls-Royce, and while he was training to be a chef, and he didn't take it because of that, and so he didn't want me to be the same. He wanted me to make my future my choice, and I left. And when my wife was heavily pregnant with our second child, we were staying at first. We just moved into the new house, just up from my in-laws' house, and we were over their place just having dinner, and I put Clem and my oldest child then into the cot. She's 17 months and still sort of in a cot at that time because the in-laws didn't have a spare bed, so I put her in the cot and I'm singing songs to her, and next thing I know, a teddy bear flies off the shelf behind me. There was stuff behind 3 other rows of teddy bears. It was my sister-in-law's old bedroom, so there was teddy bears everywhere. It was a teddy bear that my in-laws had given me when Clem was born that sings Waltzing Matilda when you touch a button on its paw. It was a stuffed koala. That teddy bear lifted off the shelf and landed behind me. There's no other way it could do it. I started playing Waltzing Matilda, and the only way that could happen is if I touched it, and I didn't touch it. I was ever so slightly freaked, but I had a feeling it was Mum, and I was like, Mum, what are you doing? And I picked up Clem and I took her into the in-laws, and they said, what do you mean, don't I put her to bed? And I was like, no, I think she needs to stay awake a bit longer. I got a little bit freaked out. I don't usually get freaked out, but it freaked me out slightly. The second time she came and visited me was when we had a computer, the old tower computer, an old IBM K52 or whatever it was, in the bed, in the lounge room, on a desk, and a wheelie chair that we'd push in front of it like a computer desk. And I was kids were asleep, Karen was asleep, and I was going to bed. I'd been playing games on something, and I pushed the chair in, turned the computer off. Now, Mum loved touching buttons, loved calculators, loved future things, really into Doctor Who and Blake Seven and Tomorrow's World, loved future stuff. And the chair pushed back way out from under the table, and the computer turned on. And I knew it was Mum. I just knew it was. And I turned around to the void and I said, come on, Mum, I'm going to bed. Enough's enough. I'm going to bed now. And I turned the computer off and I pushed the chair back in and I went to bed. After that, she used to come quite regularly. We had an L-shaped hallway where our bedroom was in the corner, and either side of the L was my two kids' bedrooms. So if you stood at my bedroom, you could see into both doors. And Mum used to come, and I couldn't see it directly on, but I see my peripheral vision. She'd be looking at me while I was reading in bed, and she'd look over at the kids' bedrooms, and sometimes she'd go to the one bedroom, others she'd go to the other, and she'd do it quite regularly. And for me, it was a feeling that she was saying, I'm looking after you, and I'm looking after the kids. And over time, she just disappeared and faded, and very, very rarely she would come. I haven't seen her for a long time. I think she's now well and truly past and is happy where she is, and happy that the kids are how they are and how we are in life. Because it was a tough time coming to Australia, tough time changing culturally, taking away from family, away from 24 or 5 years of my existence to a completely different country. Yes, we spoke the same language, but there was still a lot of differences back then. Not so much now, but it was very difficult to settle in because I was individual. I wasn't like a lot of the others that were here. And Canberra, being Canberra back then, was quite a quiet place and a quite one-horse town. Not so much now. It's really vibrant and youthful and full of vigour, but back then it wasn't. The airport was a shed, and if you wanted a vegetarian meal, they would just take the meat out of the dish and give you what was left. That was the kind of planet, the kind of city that it was on. It was adverts for sheep dip, I remember. Anyway, different world. So that's the nice side of my haunted life. But after that, I came across some interesting ones. Working on a film shoot in a place called Bungendore, which is just outside Canberra. It's a lovely little town. There's a pub there called the Carrington, which is quite renownedly haunted. And we were shooting an advert for mattresses that had, it paid the bills. Anyway, we put a candle on one bar because we were shooting it like as if the person was coming to bed with candles, like was set in the old times. And we put the candle in one bar and we shut the two doors to the one bar. And we were having a coffee outside and a cup of tea and whatever. Went back into the bar and the candle was not there. It had moved, and I'm not lying here, it had moved to the other bar. And to move it to the other bar, you had to bring it out the front, take it past us, and put it in the other bar. There was no other way around. And apparently this is quite a common thing for the ghost at the Carrington to do, is to move objects. This, listen to say, it was during the day. So all this business about ghosts only coming out at night, it's a load of hokum, because a lot of my experiences have been during the day. Another one was I was at the Yarralumla Brickworks, which is an old brick factory here in Canberra, making Canberra red bricks, and we were shooting a war movie, a war scene of some kind. I was making some really interesting graphic chest wounds. So I was in one of the arches where they make the bricks. I was on my own, painting my appliances, ready to apply them to the actor. The crew were the other side of the brickworks. I was on my own, quietly, mid-afternoon, and I thought, hang on, I felt like I wasn't alone. I looked up, and peering around the corner was a young kid, little kid, blonde haired. I couldn't tell if he had blue eyes. His face was indiscriminate. He smiled at me. Literally all I could see was his head and shoulders, and then his head went back, and that was the end of it. I thought, okay, must be one of the kids in the thing. I don't know what the actors are. So I went over. It was about a 5 to 10 minute walk to the closed set. So if you know what a closed set it means, is that it's no one's in. It's locked set. And I said to the director, I said, "Where's the kid? Blonde haired kid. Are we using him as part of the shoot?" And he's like, "No kids, mate. It's just us." And I found out later that the Brickworks is quite a phenomenally haunted place. Usually by a child ghost haunts the place. So lucky, it wasn't threatening, wasn't scary, gave me a bit of a shiver, but it wasn't anything menacing. If you want menacing, well, I'm going to give you menacing right now, because this is the one that's been leading up to it. I mean, there are lots of stories that I could tell you. I'm sort of cherry picking them, right? This is the one that became very personal, came home with me, and least to say, it was something that really I felt threatened by, and it took a lot of time. It took me a little while to get over it, actually. So I'm just going to take a break because this is a long one. I want to just have a pop off for a second and get some more drinks. So I'll see you again after the break, and we'll talk about what I would consider my most haunting experience. Bye for now. Welcome back to This Haunted Life, a spin-off, I would say, of Heavy Metal Tones. A different thought altogether for this particular part of the season of the year. But I hope you're enjoying it. Anyway, this is when it becomes really personal, and this is a warning to all of you out there that this can happen to you, and you need to make sure that if you're going to do anything, and I hate the term ghost hunting because I do go looking for spirits, but I don't go hunting them. I think it's very the wrong term. I'm not a big fan of it. But Karen and I both have a love of, particularly myself, colonial buildings. So, and I mean colonial prisons mainly, prisons and hospitals. This country, Australia, has some absolutely fascinating and, in a weird and strange way, beautifully built and designed colonial prisons. Now, obviously, a prison is a prison and is going to hold some residual energies, like my house in Hendon did, and like the cinema did. It's going to hold residual energies. Some of them good, some of them bad, a lot of them very, very sad, and very much, I don't know what the word is, I won't say violent, but there's some real energies there. Anyway, we'd been to several, here and there, never had any major problems. A few, things that may have sort of followed, I may have got something, but this particular time, we were at a good friend's wedding, so this is about 11 years ago, and it was at the Hunter Valley, which is just outside Sydney. It's a beautiful place. There's great golf courses, the wineries there. It's one of my favourite places in Australia, actually, and one of the best holidays my wife and I have ever had, actually. But it was the day of the wedding, and we thought, what we're going to do in the morning, because it was all in the afternoon, and we were staying at this lovely golf resort, beautiful place. And we're not really wine people, so we weren't going to go to wineries. It just wasn't our thing. We thought we were going to drink at the wedding anyway. So we found out that Maitland Jail had tours. Now, Maitland is a little town in Hunter Valley, and it's got a major jail that has been decommissioned back in 89. Was it 92? One of the around that time. And it was a prison for violent criminals. Had some very, very nasty criminals in there. An old jail had been around there for a long time, and you could do tours, and I thought, well, why not? So we got in the car, we drove to Maitland, we had a great coffee there first, a little walk around the town, went past the house which I found out was haunted, which my friend John lived in, which is a very small world, and we did the tour of the prison. Now, there were the prison itself, because it had two sections. It had an old Victorian part, and it had a modern part. And the old Victorian part, now, you got these little, as you went in, you were given these little tour guides. You put your headphones in, and you press play, little MP3 players, right? And there was only myself, my wife, a heavily pregnant woman and a partner, and a small group of special needs kids with their helpers. Now, they were way ahead of us. We could see them coming and going, but they were way ahead of us. They were nowhere near us. And we were in the old part, and we're sitting there looking at these different cells, hearing the stories about these, the separation between women and men, and how the gays and the heterosexuals, they separated them and all this sort of stuff, and the Aboriginals and so on. Back then it was quite a harsh place. And we heard this almighty bang, like a real bang, like a cell door banging. And we looked up and we could see, because there was 3 floors, 3 gantries, and there was no one around us. And we both stopped our MP3 players and rewound it to see if it was on there. It might have been a sound effect. It wasn't. And we got a little bit freaked out and was like, quick, let's get out. That felt menacing, right? So we couldn't go back the way we come, so we had to keep going. You had a specific way you had to follow. And we got out into the main courtyard, and we were a bit rustled. The feathers were a bit rustled, but it was okay. Didn't think too much of it. Thought, well, maybe just the wind or something we've misheard, someone else in another tour group person, and we brushed it off. And we come across one cell, and it was the cell of Ivan Milat, a very well-known serial killer here in Australia. That was the sort of the inspiration for Wolf Creek, and he was there for a little while before he was moved to another prison, to Goulburn, I believe. And anyway, we would go in and out of the cells, but I was not overly impressed by that. I felt very uneasy, but Karen went in and asked her to shut the door behind her, and I got this sudden sense of panic. She was in there, and I got this sudden sense of panic, real heavy panic. And I opened up the door and I said, "Get out, come on, you're not doing that, I don't want you in there." I didn't feel at all good. And through the whole tour, and we went around the whole of the prison, the bathrooms, we went to the death cell where I got a really bad headache, where the lady, now this could have been, I don't know, well actually no, it wasn't put in my head, because we only found out that you get the headache in that room after we left. I talked to the woman at the desk, and she said, "How did you go to your tour?" And I said, "We went to the death cell." And she said, "How was that?" I said, "I've got a really bad headache." She said, "Men get headaches in there." Strange, right? We went to the kitchens. We went around the whole place. We even went to the bit where one of the creepiest bits was where you can talk to you get visitors, a visitor centre. So I was one side as if I was a prisoner, and Karen was the other side as if she was a visitor, and I had to go for a whiz, and I was like, I'll use the toilets behind me, and she's sitting there, and I went into the toilet, and it was a very small toilet, very cold, and a really baking hot 40-degree day. It was bitterly cold in there, and I felt like someone was standing behind me, breathing on my neck. It was really freaky. Anyway, not much happened after that, and we went round the prison, had a great time, came back, went to the wedding, had an absolute fucking phenomenally good time, and came back to Canberra. And about a week later, my 2 girls used to work late nights in a cafe on Friday nights. I didn't work Friday, this was my day off, and my wife used to work in night times as well in a takeaway, just because she was doing a food course thing, and she liked that it was a bit of work experience for her, which she just enjoyed doing in the end. And so Friday nights was on my own, and I was putting washing out on the washing line, and my daughter was about to go out to work, and I've got a big sliding door with quite a heavy lock, and now to lock that lock you have to physically, you hear it lock, right? And it's a really quite a stiff lock. I shut the door and I went to the washing line, and I heard the front door close. I thought, oh, my daughter's gone, no problem. And then I was hanging the washing out, and I turned back round. It was about 5:25, and I couldn't open. No, I was taking the washing off the line, sorry. And I couldn't open the door. It was locked. I thought, it's funny. Gwyn knew I was in the back garden. Why did she lock it? Which is not what she would do. So I thought it must have just been an accident. I'll wait till Karen comes home. She'll be home in about 10 minutes. I'll just sit in the garden and relax. And as I was looking through the kitchen window, there was this black mass, and I'm going to say the whole entryway from the kitchen to the front room and to the stairs up was this engulfed by black. Couldn't see it through it. This was a bright sunny, it was a November afternoon, right? Here in Australia it was getting hot, and I looked at it for it felt like a few seconds. It looked like it was looking at me, and then it just flashed up the stairs. It shrank and flew up the stairs. There's like a cape behind it, like a figure of a human with a cape, almost shapeless, but I could tell it was human. And I freaked out. Oh, it It felt like it was going for minutes, but it was only a few seconds. And within a minute or two, the front door opens and my lovely wife comes in. I'm standing there looking through the door. She lets me in. I tell her what's happened. I didn't tell her about the black shape. I just said, look, I think we got locked up by Gwyn. Oh, that silly girl. Off she goes and Karen gets changed to go off to work. Now, I'm on my own, okay? I'm thinking I had put this black shape in the back of my mind. I thought, surely it was just a figment of imagination, and I forgot about it. Karen went off to work. And it was around about 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night. It started to get dark. And I suddenly felt this absolute sense of dread. Real, heavy dread. To the point where I couldn't take my eyes off the stairs when upstairs. I couldn't take my eyes off them. And suddenly, I heard... We've got wooden floors, no carpets. I heard footsteps upstairs. I heard a cupboard open, a cupboard shut, and footsteps, and then dragging. And I sat there in the chair looking at the stairs. I couldn't face away from it. I couldn't turn away from it. I felt this absolute sense of fear and dread and apprehension. And it felt like a fortnight until I'm sitting there dying for a wee. I couldn't get to the toilet. Couldn't go make up dinner. I couldn't get a drink. I just stood there staring at this stairwell, hearing these noises. And it was about 9 o'clock at night, and both my kids come in, and Karen. And all of a sudden, the dread goes like that, lifts, as if it never happened. And every time for the next month that I was on my own on a Friday night, and as soon as the girls left and it started to turn dusk, things would happen. Noises, sense of dread, fear. I had to paint the stairwell. I remember I was painting the stairwell up to the stairs, and I couldn't look at the top of the stairs. I had this sense that I was being watched. I hated every minute of it. I would do halfway, and then I'd tell the family that I got tired, and I did the rest in the morning. I would make my dinner. I would take my chair, and I would sit at the bottom of the stairs looking up, because the stairs turn left, so the corner, up to the corner, as if I took my eyes off it, it would come for me. And I felt absolutely full of dread and fear. And why, I don't know, but I was talking to an old friend of the family's, and she's quite spiritual. Kit, her name was. She now lives up near the Hunter Valley as well. And she had lost her husband a few years before. And I was chatting to her, and she said, "You don't seem yourself." I said, something's in my house. Something is not letting me rest, but it only seems to come for me. And I told her where we'd been, and what had happened, and the sense of dread I'd had in the prison. And she said to me, "You know what it is, Tony? Something's attached itself to you, has followed you home, obviously clearly likes you. You need to tell it to go. You need to be quite firm and say, this is my place, leave and go now." And I was sort of like, felt a bit of a ninny really. And the following week came, and the same thing happened again. More noises, more dread, until I sort of had enough. I thought, this is my house, this is my place. How dare you? And I went to the stairs, and at the bottom of the stairs, in the loudest voice I could gather, I said, "Thank you for coming and visiting, but you are not welcome. Please leave." And I'm not lying. As I'm sitting here, like, you might think I'm lying, right? I'm not. But that sense of dread lifted. Now, it did not go straight away. I still felt a bit of apprehension going upstairs in the dark of my house. I still felt this apprehension being on my own in the dark upstairs in the house. Never downstairs, only upstairs. And only when I was alone. But it did fade and went pretty quickly. Within a week or so, it was gone. Maybe a few days. It wasn't instantaneous, but it was gone. So my warning to you, friends, listeners to this, that if you are going to... I've learned since then how to protect myself. There are things that I do to clean and keep myself safe from these things that might attach. If you do that, you are interested in going and seeking the other side, be a little bit cautious, be understanding that these things are not to be dabbled with. It might be fun in movies. It might be okay in your lyrics in your metal songs. It might be something that you feel that you could do without any protection. But trust me, after this experience, and it really, really rattled me. It wasn't a day. It wasn't a one-off. It went on for weeks. And it wasn't till years later that I told the family, and it really freaked them. They got really upset with me that I didn't tell them. But how could I tell them? What would they do? It would just scare them, because it didn't affect them. It only affected me. So the moral of the story is, if you are gifted and you do see them and they do come to you, protect yourself. On one side note, I did have a really sweet moment only recently where I was on the bus going to work, and I saw this guy at the side of the road picking rubbish up, an old man picking rubbish up and putting it into a plastic bag. Now, the bus was at a part of the road where there was no crossings, there was no parks to duck into, there was no way of being out of my vision. I'm looking at him, he's looking down at the ground and he's picking rubbish up, and I looked down at my watch to see what time it was. I looked back, bus hasn't moved, he is completely gone. There was nowhere for him to go. And I just feel that was really sweet. I think he was just saying, hey, I'm here cleaning my part of the world that I'm really proud of, and this is what I like to do. I saw a runner once. I was running down a narrow alleyway, no one around me. I saw a guy all dressed in white at the front of me running, old gentleman. I looked on my watch, I looked up, and he wasn't there. And there was no way coming out from either side of it. And that gave me a warm feeling as well, because that said to me, he loves doing this. He probably died running, but he loves doing this, and this is what he'll do. His spirit will do, because it's what he meant to him. And same with that guy cleaning the streets. It was like his way of keeping his spiritual part of the world clean. It's warm feelings, really. It's not always demons, and that's another thing. When you watch some of these programs, and all it is, particularly the American ghost programs, all demons. It's not. It really is not. It's usually just residual energy, or someone just trying to contact to say, hey, I'm here and I'm still okay. It's not all monsters, demons and the devil. It really isn't. Anyway, that's my Halloween show. I hope it didn't spook you out too much. I'd love to hear your stories. Do reach out to me. Message me on Facebook with some of your stories if you've got any. If you're willing to let me hear them, I'd love to know. And all mine are, on hand on heart, you can't see me, are true to me. Whether you believe me or not, that's fine. Anyway, enjoy the spooky season. Keep safe if you are going to go and do that sort of stuff. If you're going to look for the darker realms in life, keep safe, because there are good things and there are bad things, and the bad things unfortunately are the ones that cling to you, not often are the good ones. So anyway, talk to you next week when it'll be more music related next time. Happy Halloween. Bye for now.